So I got Hearts Iron 4 several months ago, and I've spent way too much time playing this game. And getting into it was really hard because I think the tutorial is absolutely terrible for how complex of a game it is. And I couldn't find anything on YouTube to really get me started. So in this, I'm going to walk through the Italian tutorial and explain exactly what the steps mean and also other things I do to set up the initial play and explain why I'm clicking on the things I am. Alright, first off, let's stop this music that I currently have muted in the recorder. And up here on the top right, there's a little music icon. You can hit pause. And to me, I don't really like the music, so I always pause it first thing. Let me change the settings real quick. Alright, now I have the music paused, but the other game sound should come through. And you see step one of the tutorial. It gives you a few details on how to control the camera and select different things in the game. And it's asking us to do these different objectives down here. Basically, that is referring to these icons up here, and we're going to go through and take care of those one at a time. So we'll start with this military factories. I'll move this over here a little bit. Okay, if we click this, it's automatically going to bring up the production menu here. And this icon will pop up at the top whenever there's free military factories. And you always want to have all of your factories producing items. For Italy, you're considered one of the majors, but yet you don't have the industrial base of Germany or the United States. So I'm going to focus on infantry, which means I'm going to need a lot of infantry equipment. And you can see starting out, we're already behind the ball on that. I'm going to also select the tank. I'm just going to go with the basic one for now. We're going to use that for breaking through front lines and specialized units later. I just want to get a couple factories stockpiling them. Support equipment is also important. Infantry equipment and support equipment are the two most used items you have. And that's why that's the majority of what I'm producing right now. And then I'm going to throw in trucks. Trucks will be needed. I'm going to back that off a little bit so that I can get some trucks going. And see, as I click back one factory here, the gray ones automatically show up. If I add another factory here, and I'm left clicking to add these, once I build my 21st factory or capture a territory that has it, then it would automatically start producing trucks. I'm also going to add in artillery and anti-air, and I want those later, but I don't necessarily care about those starting out right away. So dockyards, you want those producing ships, most likely convoys and destroyers starting off. Convoys become important later in the game, and I'm going to move that to the top so that hopefully I always have some being produced. Destroyers are the damage sinks of your fleet. And at the top, if you mouse over these icons, you can see exactly what it is. The tooltips in this game are very helpful. So I'm going to filter that to destroyers, and I'm just going to choose the default one and assign a bunch of dockyards to it. And now all of my dockyards are used. If you click on the naval repair queue, it's going to have this flyout menu. I want all my dockyards to be able to repair ships. Your dockyards will build from the build queue unless there's a ship that needs repaired. If you press and hold the shift key, you can see that all these plus or minuses, and this is another way to add factories instead of just clicking the boxes, is plus or minus. So I want to hit shift, and I'm going to increase the number of dockyards to repair. I'm just going to give it all 15. And at the top here, you can see how many resources are needed for production, along with each individual one. Right now, this -2 in red on the rubber means that I am missing rubber for trucks. In order to get that rubber, I'm going to hide this real quick. And that when you hide the tutorial steps down here on the right, it adds an icon to bring that up. Okay, so I'm going to deal with this rubber real quick. And I'm going to see if I currently have any territory that produces rubber. To do that, down here on the right, you have a bunch of different maps, and if you mouse over, you'll see each one. For the resource map, I can click that and it's going to change our view. And you can also use the hotkey. In this case, it's F8. So my main territory is not producing any rubber. Don't see any down here. Have a couple here. Now, currently don't have rubber, but we're at war with Ethiopia. So once I capture Ethiopia, I will have rubber. That means for now, I am going to switch the order of these. And I'm going to reduce that. I have to delete it all the way to get rid of that last factory. And I'm going to re-add trucks. And I'll produce those once I have captured Ethiopia. I could also trade for resources. Up here, this icon with the crate and circular arrows, you can trade resources, but you're giving up a civilian factory for that. We can see I do have a shortage of tungsten now because I switched my queue around. If you trade for a resource, I could go here and trade with Portugal for it, but I spend one civilian factory for 8 resources, and if I only need one of those, that doesn't seem to be a very good deal. So let's go back to the production menu by left clicking on the wrench icon with the gear and see what's taking it. It's the artillery. We're going to decrease that, and now we have one anti-air. So looking at resources now, everything is green, and that takes care of that icon. Let's not show that tooltip again. Okay, so filling out production, we have the military factories taken care of, and we have the dockyards being used. Now let's look at civilian factories. That would be the icon up here. If we click that, it's the same as hitting the excavator. The 10 factories that are being used for consumer goods. And if I click on a military or civilian factory, you're going to see how many build spaces you have in this view. Let me minimize that again. So you have the road icon with 80%. That stands for your infrastructure. There's 5 levels of infrastructure, and the higher the infrastructure, the faster your civilian factories will build anything in this menu. So the best route would be to click infrastructure and then click here, increase that, and then build a factory on it. I'm going to use a national focus to increase that. So for the time being, I'm just going to select a civilian factory, and I'll build one here, 5 of 8, so it has space for another building. and that'll use my factories until I can get through a national focus, which is also one of these right there, national focus. We have to pick that. That would be this icon. You can also get here by clicking your flag in the top left and then select the national focus. So this section here, going all the way to naval power, is, I consider it the primary focus tree. It's what was here before they started expanding the focus tree. Over here on the right side, there's a lot of options, and that you have alternate histories. If you go straight down, that's more of a traditional playthrough per se. I say per se because in real life Italy fell apart, and El Duce, well, if you know history, you know what happened to him. But anyways, so this alternate history stuff starts out with your war in Ethiopia at the top. And instead of selecting one of those, we're going to bypass it by quickly winning the war. In the meantime, I want to build up Italy's infrastructure with Italian highways. And I'm choosing here because there's a lot of factories in this area, and I also really want this one right here. That'll give me another research slot, which we'll be talking about in a second. So let's start that national focus. Alright, we'll skip for division for a second and go straight to research right here. And we can see that icon at the top. Click that. That would be this icon in the menu. And this stuff on the top right, industry, is the area where you want to start. So I'm going to grab this one and construction, and we'll start doing synthetics. The first half of the war, this fuel up here is something you have to constantly balance. Eventually you'll get to the point where you have so much you don't necessarily need to watch it at all. But for now I need to be cognizant of it. And then the other stuff I want to grab, since I'm going to be more infantry focused as Italy, is infantry weapons and equipment. So talk about this. Support weapons, year 1918-ish. That means I can research it for 161 days. Over here, under 1938, I have improved infantry equipment. And if you mouse over and hold it, you can see that it's 2 years ahead of time, so you incur a research penalty. If I wait till 1938, it's going to be about the same research time as support weapons 1, and it varies somewhat. And then you can also click on these to see more details. So this will become useful when you're designing tanks and aircraft. You can see if you click on it, you get this base infantry equipment, and then you can see that like heavy machine gun comes from this one, and additional machine guns. And when you're building your tanks or planes, you're going to need to look at some of these to see what you need to research to get what you want. So like for this one example, you have different cannons for your tanks. Alright, let's do support weapons, and then that will take care of that one. And now let's talk about recruit and deploy. So this little tank icon with the down arrow is basically what you're choosing to train. It's always good to have more troops in the field than you need, because you'll want to have defenses for naval invasions. I'm just going to train the basic template for the time being. At this point in the war, it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to put 24 because I like a stack of an army at a time. And then you need to set a location, so when it says no location set, it won't drop them onto the map when they're done. And then it'll highlight green the areas where you can tell it to be dropping your troops. We'll just choose by Rome. And that takes care of that. While we're in here, we can see that there's these different priorities set. I am going to give garrisons a low priority. Operations is for the La Resistance expansion. I'm going to give it a high priority. I don't really like that expansion much or use it for much other than stifling resistance. Upgrades, neutral. Give supply trucks a high priority. And reinforcements. I like to try to keep my troops in the field supplied before training new divisions. As the troops' supply level depreciates, so does their effectiveness. And we'll talk about that later. Okay. So that takes care of that. And now we're on to the second step of the tutorial. You have this arrow kind of guiding you down here, and it just wants you to go here. And we're going to select all these troops by left clicking, left click, drag a box, release, and now I have all the troops in this area selected. I'm going to right click on this icon down at the bottom that says New Army. And now all those divisions are given to that army. And I'm going to give that army to a field marshal by having this army selected and then right clicking on the commander icon. Now we have to select a general. This war in Ethiopia is really just an opportunity to grind some generals. So he's probably one of my best. You can sort them by their attributes by using this menu at the top. And this guy is clearly the best one I currently have, so I'm going to select him for up here. And as these generals level up, these stats will increase. And if you hover over it, you can see the bonus that the stats give you. And this game is really just about trying to stack as many bonuses as possible. So now you can see that all these divisions have an exclamation mark by them. That means that they currently do not have orders. And it wants us to draw a front line. So the battle plan menu down here, left click that icon, and if you hover over this line you can see it turns green. These other sections are other countries. We're not at war with all of them, so each line is distinct. If I was at war with every single one of these countries, then I would assign the army to the entire line at once, unless I were to right click and drag along the front. And if you zoom in, you can see that you're kind of dragging this line. So if I release there, I could select this front line icon again, press and hold the shift key, and if I mouse over the dot, right click, I can drag it all the way. Or I can just click the front line and it's done. This delete order icon, you can select it and delete an individual order, or if you right click this, it'll ask us if we want to delete all the orders. Hit OK. So there's my front line. Then offensive line, I left click on that tool, and then I right click somewhere and I just drag along, and you can see this arrow pointing to the new line. That's where I want them to attack to. Alright, let's do that for the southern troops. Drag a selection box around them. Right click them onto a general. Let's assign a general. Grab him. And now drag him over into this green box area for the field marshal. Let's take the front line tool, left click on that, left click on the front line I want, left click on offensive line, right click and drag. And now we have a movement up from the south. Click on the field marshal, and we don't have one assigned yet, so click on his portrait, click to assign. We'll just choose this guy. Being in a desert, supplies are an issue. Let's see if we have any trucks saved up. So there's 150. Let's take this guy in the south, and if you look, here's a mortarization priority on him. You can click that once, and you should get some trucks. Click it twice, he'll get a lot of trucks. So I clicked it once. Let's see how many trucks it takes. I'm going to tap the space bar to unpause, and then pause it again. Still 150. It looks like the time didn't click over yet, so let's let that run a little longer. Still 150. Maybe more time needs to pass. Let's speed this up a little bit. And we'll let the day flip. There, the day flipped. And now we're down to 70 trucks. Okay. Next tool tip. That would be, we'll minimize that for a second. I want to end this war fast, so I'm going to send down some more divisions. These divisions are not needed up here because we're not at war with anyone else, and we know we're not going to get naval invaded at this point in the game. So I'm left clicking, and one way to look at this is the further you zoom out, the more consolidated your troops are. You can kind of see how that changes. So zooming in here, oops, switch that view back. I want to grab these 3 tanks by left clicking on them, and then I'm going to right click on the portrait of the general that I want to assign them to. So I'm going to assign the tanks to the guy in the south. The north is more mountainous, so they're not quite as useful. I'm going to take this mountain division, left click on it, then right click on the guy in the north. Take these 2, give them to the guy in the south. If I select one, press and hold the shift key, I can grab several at a time. Send all those to the northern army. Grab those 2 and send them south. With these units, they should be acclimated to the heat. There is some hot and cold acclimation in the game that gives you bonuses or negatives. I'm going to hit the space bar, see these guys move out, and if I select the proper army or the field marshal that has all these armies, you can see the arrows of these troops moving. So I want to click those 6 that are not moving and assign them to the southern army. There those guys go. Those 2 are moving. That one is not, so I'm going to assign him there. And that should be everybody. Okay, now we're going to do something similar with the Air Force. So, the current step 6, we need to view the air base, which is here. Click on the icon, and now we see the air wings. And it is asking us to assign these air wings to attack this area. If you hover over the different wings, air wings. You can see what type of combat. I'm going to select just the fighters and click air superiority for them. Then for the tactical bombers, if I select just them, I'm going to do logistic strikes. And these guys are close air support, so I'll have them do close air support. Now I'm just going to drag a box and select them all again, and right click on this region here. Okay. So it wants us to switch back to the default map mode and select an army. Make sure the army has a commander, which we did. And these commands can also be given at the field marshal level if you have a huge front line and don't want to micromanage. And now we're going to go ahead and execute these plans. To do that, you have the activate buttons on top of the generals, and just left click on it. I'm going to left click on this one too. I'm also going to change how offensive they are, and I'm going to change the execution to be aggressive. I'm going to select my other general and do the same thing, because I want to quickly wipe out Ethiopia. And up here, the game speed, you can increase or decrease or just click it, and you can see it's paused. I can click or unclick there, but the space bar is the shortcut, and it is very useful. Alright, let's see. You can see the red arrows of where the different divisions are attacking. A blue arrow means that that division is attacking that province as well, but if it wins, it won't move into that province, whereas the red arrows, once they've completed their attack, if they win, they'll move in. If they attack and get pushed back, like if this green, I like to call them battle bubbles, turns red and the attack gets repulsed, then you'll see a gray arrow moving backwards, which means that that unit is retreating. So let this play out at, yes, so we'll conquer this quickly. We'll speed this up. The extra units will help quite a bit too. Let me minimize this for now. We'll go over some of these other icons really quick. Missing equipment from production. That's because I'm not producing any aircraft. I don't really have the military factories to do a lot of aircraft, so I'm not going to worry about it. If you hover over and right click, it'll go away. And assign divisions, that could be useful. So these divisions haven't been assigned to a general yet. If you left click this, it'll flip through unassigned divisions. If you press and hold shift, it'll select all of them at once. I'm just going to assign them there, so that goes away. This no template, that's because I'm producing towed anti-air and I'm not using it yet. I don't need it till later. I'm going to right click that. Decisions available. That would be for this icon. And you can see we have a lot of decisions that we can get into later. Commandeer civilian trains. Could be useful. But right now our logistics is at 100%, so don't really need it. Right click that to dismiss it. This one, that pulls up our garrisons in occupied territories. You can also get there by left clicking on your flag and then down here in occupied territories. And we can look at these based upon different filters. Right now, we don't really have much resistance. So, I'm going to change some of these that have high compliance. And that will reduce the garrison needs. And you can switch it all the way to no garrison, but as you can see, it's going to add resistance. This one, we'll go with local police. And that has solved that issue, at least for now. And the last icon sits on the top whenever we're at war. Right now, this is a pretty simple war between just two nations. Once you get into World War II, I should say, this will be filled up with every nation on your side on the left and an enemy on the right. And you can filter it using these selectors at the top. Once you get into a war with majors, you just have to capitulate each of the majors in order to win. And you can get some details as to how the battle's going. So let's close that. And we'll let this run.
Forza, forza!
And we'll select that. You can see the movement of troops. And they're breaking through at the top and the south. So the national focus is complete. This is something you want to kind of stay on top of because it doesn't bank too much time, but it does a little. And I'm going to go down this path because I want my research. Let's see. Okay. Oh. All right. And here we go. This is a national focus that we skipped. Did Italian highways, and I'm currently working on railway innovations. And we can see that this is one that happened because of how the war is progressing. You can also get these other ones depending upon your performance in the war. Continue on. These notifications are to give you kind of the cadence leading into World War II, so you kind of know where you're at, as long as your game's on historical focus. Alright, so my civilian factories finished building that other factory. I need to assign them to something else real quick. So look at infrastructure. We can now see that these regions are at 100%, but all of their build slots are full. So I'm going to build infrastructure here in order to speed up future buildings in that area, and also because it will boost the amount of natural resources coming out here. So we left click that and you can see it'll add 2 to go up 1 level. Something over here that's at a lower level, like this one at 60, I want this one to be increased for the resources as well. If I press and hold shift, it'll automatically add the 2 levels. You can see that there and over here. If I right click, it'll remove 1. If you press and hold shift and right click, it'll remove them all. So that'll give my factory something to do. The officer corps, you spend these points up here, so the command points, and then political power will allow you to place the different generals in command. And if you click On these icons, you'll bring up the doctrine menu. You can also spend these different types of experience points on these when you have enough. They're usually 100. If you click on your flag to bring up your political menu, you can also spend political points on advisors. I want to grab one while I'm in here. I just don't remember which one. Let's see. Don't really want political. Here we go. Infrastructure, construction speed. Yes, this guy. And you can set these for different modifiers as well using your political points. Yeah, so I'm not concerned about this. The garrisons pop back up because we've been taking territory and we'll need more garrisons. Go ahead and let that run a bit. Select that next one while it runs. And then your generals get wounded. I just kind of click through them instead of replacing them or worrying about it. I could intervene and have them execute specific orders, but it really shouldn't be needed for this. It's just, you see the red skulls on them. They're suffering from bad logistics. Let's grab dispersed industry is great. If you were the United States, you'd probably want to do concentrated. Since we're in Europe, we're going to be subject to bombing. Maybe we just throw all these in at once. Attack from both directions, trying to get as many units to attack on one province as possible. And since we took that, that ends the war. You get half of their stockpile. Don't really care about that message. In this menu, if there were more war participants, the victors are on the right, the defeated on the left. You'd be basically vying with everybody else who won for different territories. With it just being us, it's pretty simple. We're basically choosing whether or not we want to puppet the state. If this was a real peace conference, then you'd probably pass a few turns because your score gets divvied out the first few turns of it. Since we're the only participant, we get all of it up front. I want to puppet Ethiopia, and I want their factories, and I want their resources. So choose each one individually and select all. Now I'm going to submit my demands. The other areas that showed up are the other territories I already owned starting out this game. And I'm going to confirm and exit. And now Italian East Africa is my puppet. So let's look at our trade. Now we have some oil, we have some rubber. Gonna go back to my production, and remember these trucks I was not building. I want to start building some now, so I'm just gonna decrease that and increase it and make sure all my trucks are being built. Okay. Now the tutorial is going to teach us how to move troops back home. So let's select a stack of them. It says we want 4 divisions. Then I'm going to right click right there on that province and have those troops move. And now that those divisions are here,
Si,
I
signore.
want to move them to Italy. I do that by right-clicking on the port, or I already right-clicked on the port by moving the units there. Now I right-click on another port.
Pronto.
Okay, so now you can see them go away on the ship. And that is the last step. Oh, that's quicker than usual. Usually nationalist Spain takes a little while longer. Okay, one last thing. This way of moving troops is pretty slow. I find a more efficient way
Si, signore.
is to select your general and either do this area defense. We'll do that. It spreads out the troops more so that the resource usage is distributed throughout a region. So left click on that. Now I'm going to left click on where I want them to go. If I click an area that's highlighted, that'll go away. With this guy, I'm going to use the frontline tool and tell him to go there. And
Pronto.
here we see the rest of those units are moving out of Ethiopia and back up to Italy. And that concludes the 15-step tutorial.